Welcome back to the I Empower podcast, season 2, where we hear inspirational stories and then we turn that into art that reminds us to be great. Each week, we dive deep into the story of a special person who discovered their power against all odds. But it doesn't stop there. All of the inspiration is then memorialized into a single unique painting that reminds us to be great. So if you, my friend, are looking to step out of your own way and into your life's full and well-deserved potential, this is the place for you.
I'm in surgery. Something is not right, and I started to pass out on the table. I felt nauseous, cold, and I passed out. I came back to, and in this interim, they had called the NICU and told the nurse that they needed my husband to come back because something was not right.
Thank you, Sarah, so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast and share your incredible story. It's so heartwarming. You actually reached out to me from one of my previous guests who I interviewed a few weeks back, Lizzie, and was like, I have a story that I need to tell, and you told me a little bit about it, and oh my gosh, I think it's an important one to hear, and I'm so excited to talk to you about it. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So today we're talking about, I tried to find a word for it, and I don't know why we always kind of feel like we have to have labels for things, but I couldn't really find a proper name for the type of family that you have, but unconventional approach to parenthood is a word that I found that I felt like kind of described it decently, because it's a really beautiful story. And so I'm gonna just have you introduce yourself and let's jump right into it.
Yeah, so I have 3 kids today, but it's taken a really long time to get here, and I think unconventional is probably the perfect word to use.
Yeah.
Because none of our kids came from let's get pregnant and have a baby situation. So we have a 6-year-old daughter, and we have 2-year-old twins. And when my husband and I first started dating, one of the things that attracted me to him was that I thought he would be a really good dad. And so we dated, we got married. We knew before we got married that we wanted to start for a family right away. And so we did. And about a year into our marriage, nothing had happened, and we felt like this isn't normal. Most people get pregnant pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So let's seek out some help. And we went to just my regular OB, and she referred us to a fertility specialist. And he did some testing, and it was at that point that we found out that my husband cannot have children. And so from that point, our doctor said, well, you have some options. You can pursue adoption, or we can start fertility treatments, or you can decide that maybe parenthood isn't for you. And so we went home, we talked about it, and we still really wanted to have kids. The idea of adoption was very foreign to us, and so it wasn't something that we necessarily wanted to pursue. We didn't like the idea of feeling like we had to share a child with someone, which is kind of the perspective of adoption that we had at that time. And so we chose to move forward with fertility treatments, and we used IUIs initially, and we did that using donor sperm. So we did that process. We did 4 rounds of IUI, just every time thinking, we're going to get pregnant, and we didn't. And after that 4th round, our doctor said, I can't explain scientifically why you were unable to get pregnant. And at this point, I would say that IUI is probably not the method for you. If you want to move forward with IVF, we can do that. Or you can take some time off and kind of decide where you're at with all of this. And we were really financially and emotionally invested in the process. So hearing that this was kind of it for that method was really hard, like life-changingly hard.
Yeah.
And we decided, we didn't have the money for IVF, quite frankly. We had spent a lot of money up until that point. And we felt like maybe this was just us being told you're not meant to be parents. And so that period of time, there was a lot that we both had to confront during that of what will our lives look like without children? Who will we be as a couple if we don't bring kids into this world? And so for me, that was a lot of like unpacking baggage of like taking care of my body, because prior to that, I thought every month I'm going to get pregnant, so it doesn't matter how I eat. I mean, I ate well, but I wasn't like working out and really taking care of myself. And I bought a big SUV thinking we're going to fill it with kids. And so we downgraded to just a sedan. And then for my husband, he pursued his hobby and started, it's now today his full-time job, but it took about 8 years to get to that point.
Yeah.
But he was really able, not being a dad, he had that extra time to put into this hobby. So that was about 2012 that we decided to make that decision. And we traveled quite a bit. We went to Spain for a couple of weeks, and we got to do a lot of fun traveling. And then in the very end of 2014, things drastically changed for us. So on Christmas Eve day of 2014, I got a text message from my friend Megan with a picture of a pregnancy test. It was positive, and she said, we need to talk. And so now I have to back up a little bit.
I'm getting cold chills already.
When we were going through our fertility treatments, I made friends with one of my coworkers, Megan. She could see how desperately I wanted to be a mother, how desperately we wanted to be parents. She was there through all of the fertility treatments as a coworker and as a friend. And there was a point where we were at a party and drinking margaritas, having a good time. And she's like, listen, I don't ever want to be a parent. It's just not what I see for my life. I don't plan on getting pregnant. But if I did, I would consider you and Ron as adoptive parents for that child. And I was like, great.
Yeah.
Get to work.
Let's do it.
Yeah. And so it was something that was brought up from time to time between 2012 and 2014. Just every once in a while, like, hey, remember, if you get pregnant, that baby's mine. But never thinking like...
Seriously, like it would actually happen.
Yeah, because who would do that for someone?
Right.
And so Christmas 2014, I get this text message, and I start crying right away because I was so overwhelmed and excited at the possibility and scared. It's every emotion you can imagine. And so I went home and I told Ron about it. And this was news to him. I never told him about
the joke.
The joke, because it was a joke.
Right.
And who would have ever thought that it would really happen? So he initially, which is just his personality, was like, no, this isn't going to happen. She's going to change her mind. Is this what we even really want now? Because we'd kind of settled into this routine of an idea of not being parents. And so I was like, well, she wants to sit down and talk. Let's sit down and talk. And he was like, okay. So a couple weeks later, we met up with her and her boyfriend. And they were like, we're serious. If you guys want this, if you want to be parents, we'll move forward with having you adopt this child.
Oh my goodness.
And so we started the process, which we had no idea what we were doing, because even with a situation like that where you already have a bio mom lined up, you have a baby happening, you still have to go through the process of being licensed to adopt, and you have to have an attorney to finalize the adoption. All of the things that you hear about with a private adoption, you still have to do in this type of situation. So there's obviously a financial side of that, and there's a lot of emotional heaviness that comes with it too. You have a social worker that comes. There's 6 hours of interviews that happen, just 2 hours with you as a couple, and then 2 hours each privately with the social worker. And they dig deep. They pull up a lot of, like, every trauma you can imagine from your childhood they want to talk about. And then there's a home inspection. They're looking for just basic safety things.
Right.
And like fire extinguishers and smoke detectors. Make sure there's no exposed wiring or anything scary.
Which is super interesting to me because you hear a lot about adoption, and, you know, there's always this battle of like women, you know, just kind of going down that women's rights rabbit hole that you can find yourself in conversation. And you hear a lot of people talk about there are tons of children out there that need homes. Everyone, you should just adopt. You should look into adoption. And I mean, you know, what we would think would be the easiest, best case scenario for adoption is what you had, someone who was pregnant, who was willing to place their child with you. You're still telling me that there is so much that goes into that financially, mentally, emotionally, which I think is interesting. And I just wanted to highlight that because a lot of people think that, you know, especially in that case scenario, that it would be easier to adopt a child, let alone, you know, if you're doing out of country, you know, overseas adoptions. And then, so wow, that is news to me. That is education to me. Thank you for sharing that because I don't think a lot of people know that.
And I didn't know it either.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And because of the relationship that we have with Megan, I was able to attend all of the appointments. I was there when we found out that it was a girl.
Aww.
And we had a name picked out already for her. And so Megan was able to start calling her by her name.
Aww.
And just really beautiful things that a lot of people who do adopt don't get to experience. I was there when she was born. I got to hold her almost right away.
Oh my goodness. That is so touching. Yeah. I'm so glad that you got that experience.
Yeah. And then because our adoption was fairly simple and easy, we finalized 3 months after she was born in the court. And the judge was really blown away, first by the relationship that we have with the biological family, and then also that Megan put our daughter's full name, the name that we wanted her to have, on her birth certificate. So in the court finalization, there was no name changing or anything. She said she'd never seen that.
Wow. That is incredible. Oh my gosh. I'm like tearing up over here. This is such a touching story. And so, you know, after that happened, did you guys remain friends? What's that relationship? You know, if there is one, what does that look like?
Yeah, we are still friends. We usually see each other a couple times a year, but we text, we're friends.
Yeah.
She has gotten to hang out with Georgia a few times, and the door is always open.
Yeah.
And she kind of plays that cool aunt role.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, there's no perfect, even in this most perfect relationship and situation, it's still not perfect. And there's still trauma and pain that happens with that. I think we'll see that more as she gets older, but I'm already starting to see little pieces of it. She knows her story. She knows that she grew in Megan's tummy, and then because she loves us so much and loves her so much, she gets to live with us. But she'll still sometimes say, like, I want to see a picture of Megan. I want my real mommy.
Aww.
And so I just remind her, I'm her real mommy. Megan is very special, and she grew in Megan's tummy, but I'm the mommy.
Yeah.
And it's hard, you know?
Yeah.
But it's hard. She's 6. So she's still and will still wrestle with her identity for a very long time.
Right. I can understand that. I think what you guys have created, though, is so beautiful for Georgia, that she still, you know, at least she has that ability to connect with her, you know, with her mother. She knows who her biological, I'm not even sure if I'm saying that right, because, you know, yes, biological mother, but yes, birth mother, but in the sense, she was, you know, just the person who carried your baby. And I think that, I don't know, I don't want to say how you guys, you know, bring that up. You know, that's I can imagine would be a difficult conversation to have, but also an important one. And I just want to give you guys kudos, because I think what you're doing is incredible. And I know that you're going to raise a very beautiful, well-rounded individual.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to tell you have so much strength because, like you said, she's already at a young age, you know, battling with identity and battling with, you know, who is a mother, who is not a mother. And I think that, you know, highlighting the fact, because she's not alone in her journey with this. There are millions and millions of children out there, millions of people out there who grew up in an unconventional family, who, you know, who may never ever get to see who their birth parent was. And, you know, I just think that what you guys are doing is just beautiful.
Thank you.
I think you're doing a good job. I couldn't imagine the strength that it takes, the mental strength, the physical strength. But I think she's going to be great. I think she's going to do great.
Thank you.
So tell me, you know, you said you have twins. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So Georgia was born in 2015, and around age 2 for her, I started feeling like we need more kids in this family. Like, Georgia's not it. And because of our history, we're like, well, what do we do? And so we contacted the agency that we had licensed with for her adoption, and we initiated the process to begin adoption again. This time was different because we didn't have a baby lined up. And so we just slowly began the process, and, you know, like digging deep for faith that if this is what was meant to be for our family, that another baby would come along.
What happened? Yeah.
Yes. And so we were I'd say about 3/4 of the way through the licensing process, and we got a call from a friend of an old friend of my husband's saying, this little boy, he's 15 months old, he's been pulled from his home by DCS. He's now in the foster care system. Nobody in the direct family can take him. Would you be willing to foster him? And foster care was not something that we had ever talked about. We knew next to nothing about it. But we decided that, it was after we saw pictures of him, of course, that if we could do it, we would. And that was it. It's just that one stipulation. And so we reached out to our licensing worker, our social worker, and we asked her, like, where we are at in this process, could we foster a child? And she was like, yeah. So within a couple of days, we had his case manager came and brought him to our home, and we felt walking into it like we're equipped, like we're already parents.
Yeah.
We know what adoption is like. Foster care can't be that different, and we were 100% wrong. So foster care, typically there's a series of classes that you have to take in order to get licensed for foster care. And now, having experienced it and experienced the classes because we took them while our child was with us, I can't say enough that like do it the right way. Like get licensed first so you know what to expect. Have that community around you and people who have experienced foster care as well, because doing it alone is almost impossible. And foster kids always come with baggage, and they bring their stuff, but they also have all of the baggage. They're being taken from a home that is unsafe or, neglect, you name it. Yeah. And so our little boy came from a home where there was neglect, but there was also like an over coddling atmosphere. So he was 15 months old and he was immobile. He just would sit. He couldn't crawl or walk. He was still drinking mostly formula, and he would eat Puffs and Easy Mac, which with Georgia, I homemade everything for her. Like everything I could make, I made for her. And so having to adjust to a child like these are the calories that he's going to get today, and I just have to be okay with that. Yeah. So just letting go of a lot of control, I think, would be the theme of our foster care journey. And then, bending to the whims of the system. So going to doctor's appointments and facilitating visitation and just not being in control of any of that situation.
So when you say facilitating visitation, does that mean that the birth parents got to see really?
Yes.
Wow. So you had to be like overseeing that.
We had to allow for it, and then to help. They lived pretty far away from us, about an hour away. And so for some of the visitation, we met halfway. And then for some of it, we had a transport. So it's somebody that works for DCS would come to our house and pick him up and take him to see his parents. And then she would bring him back. But we had to be willing to do it at the times that they wanted and the days, and then just be open to that.
So did you work a job when you were fostering this child?
Yes, I worked I worked part-time at night. Okay. And so Georgia has never been in childcare. So I would be home with the kids during the day, and then when my husband got home from work, I would go to work.
Okay. I was going to say, oh my gosh, like what if you were at work and did they like plan these things out, or was it very much on a whim?
Both. It really depended on the situation.
Okay.
But there were some things that happened while I was at work and I had to leave. Yeah. They turned us in for abuse. They thought that we were abusing their son.
What?
Yeah. And so I was at work and I had like 14 missed calls on my phone. I finally picked it up, and it was an investigator. He was standing at our door. And my husband wasn't home with our daughter, and he was with his parents. And so I had to run home, call my husband to have him come home. And so we had to be interviewed by an investigator and cleared of those allegations. And they just, they dropped off our record because it wasn't true.
Right. Oh my God. And so like the birth parent was just like, blah, blah. And then they're like, okay, we're going to investigate it. I cannot even begin to imagine the mental strength that it takes to foster children. Oh my gosh. Because I can imagine that how maybe you felt when the child would go be for visitations and you're like, I don't want that baby. I don't want my baby to go over there. Because I'm sure you developed this like personal, real attachment to these children.
Yeah. Wow. And that's the goal of foster care, is creating those relationships and giving that child a stable, loving environment, and then being able to say goodbye. And that's the part that I think was really, I mean, it's very difficult. That's not natural.
Yeah.
But it's also not what I was prepared for.
Yeah.
So if I had done those classes ahead of time, I think today I could do it more easily.
Okay.
And feel less broken about how that whole experience was.
Yeah. And so how long did you have the little one before, obviously, the little one's not with you anymore?
Yeah. It was about 6 months. And that was a shock too, because our case plan was working towards reunification. So he came to us in October, and he was supposed to reunify. The court was looking like at June. And so that's what we had in our head. That's what we were told, that he would stay with us until reunification. And then they ended up changing his case plan like overnight. And he reunified in March, the end of March or the beginning of April. So much earlier than we were anticipating. And that's just a phone call from his case manager saying, hey, he's reunifying, and I need you to have his stuff packed by this time tomorrow, and I will come and get him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And so like there is really no heads up on that. No like emotional, like prepared. Like I feel like at least if you said like next week, I could be like, okay, we're going to go do all the fun things and like, let me take off of work and spend some time with this child. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So we had one night that we were just like, all right, we're doing it big. And so I made him a ton of vegetables because he was eating vegetables with us. And we had a big dinner.
I'm crying.
And I let him have ice cream. I was like, we're going big.
Yeah. Oh, that is so precious.
Yeah.
I'm sure that the impact that you guys made on his life is a lifelong one. So.
I hope so.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh, and so after the little one left, you just have Georgia, and you guys are still feeling that linger, that urge to have children. I'm sure more children. Fill your home.
There was a period of time, I would say it was about 3 months after he went back to his biological family, that we were just really broken feeling, because we had put all of our energy into being there for this boy, for championing his case, for just really fighting for him. And then to have that taken away and so abruptly was just such a shock. And there's a lot of, like, I worry about him. I still worry about him. And that was years ago. Yeah. I would say not a day goes by that I don't think about him still. But especially in those moments, like, what is he doing? And our daily routine was totally changed. And yet I felt this sense of joy and release of just being able to spend time with Georgia. Like, going back to one kid is so easy.
Yeah.
And just really being able to spend time with her alone felt good. And then I felt guilt for feeling good.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Mom guilt. Man.
Yeah. Not knowing where he was at and how he was feeling, if he felt like I abandoned him.
Oh, God.
And then my relationship with my husband was really strained too, because we process very differently. I process like continuously and out loud, and he's very like 6 months from now he'll feel things, but until then it just goes way down, and he gets quiet, and I don't respond well to quiet. I need a verbal.
Talk through it. Yeah.
And so our relationship was very strained for a long time, and it took a lot of hard conversations and crying together before we came to like a good spot again. Yeah. And I would say it was after that point that we started feeling that desire again. And we just never reached out again to our case manager. And I mean, I'm assuming that at this point our adoption license, what the work that we had done towards it is now gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was just kind of like done at that point. And it was around that time that the company my husband was working for got bought out by a larger company, and they offered fertility assistance. So we talked about it, and we decided that it's available to us. Why shouldn't we try?
Yeah.
And so we were able to reach back out to the doctor, the fertility doctor that we had used previously. And in the interim, from when we had seen him before and that point, he had opened his own clinic offering more reasonable IVF and fertility treatments. And so combined with his prices and the fertility assistance from my husband's work, IVF became a financial possibility for us. And so we started that process.
So exciting.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And this time around, the first time that we did it, we really brought a lot of people into it, thinking that we were going to get pregnant. We talked about it and we told people, and we learned from that first experience that you also have to share the downs. And if you're not emotionally prepared for that, then you should probably keep it to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this time we kept it very quiet. We didn't really tell very many people what we were doing. And there's a lot that leads up to the actual IVF process. So there's about 3 to 4 months where you're just going in regularly for blood draws and ultrasounds, just to kind of get a baseline of what your body, how your body works without medications. And then you start the medication process, which is daily injections and, again, blood draws and testing. And that leads up to the egg retrieval, which is just a small surgery that you go in for, and they put you under for just a couple minutes where they retrieve your eggs. And then the eggs are fertilized. And for us, we use donor sperm again. And then those embryos, whatever embryos are created by adding the sperm to the eggs, are watched to make sure that they are growing appropriately, and they are tested to make sure that they'll continue to grow appropriately, and then they're frozen. There's 2 different ways to do IVF. There's a fresh transfer and then a frozen transfer. Our doctor only did frozen transfers, so our embryos were frozen.
Yeah.
So for us, with the egg retrieval, we got 18 eggs, and then 12 of them fertilized, and 6 grew, and 5 tested well. So we had 5 embryos.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that typical? That sounds like a lot. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard all over the map for people.
Yeah. You hear about people having like quadruplets and
yeah. That's really
rare.
rare now. Most doctors won't transfer more than 2 embryos at a time.
Okay.
Because of things like that.
Yeah. Oh my God. I could not even imagine.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So then there's a period of time in between when the retrieval happens. For a frozen transfer, you go through your whole cycle again before they're able to make the transfer. And so we went in January of 2019. Yes. And we did the transfer. And at that point, they say, you are pregnant until proven otherwise, because they've just placed an embryo in your uterus. And then it's a 10-day wait between when they place the embryo and when they do the blood test to confirm pregnancy. So like 10 days of feeling like I'm pregnant and this is so exciting, but I don't know yet. And so I went in and I had my blood draw and I found out that I was not pregnant.
And so real quick, I just want to like wrap my head around that. Science just amazes me. So when they fertilize the egg outside, which is what basically the IVF stands for, is, you know, fertilizing the egg, and they test it to see if the egg, like when you say it that it's like good, what kind of, like, what does that mean?
They're looking for diseases and conditions that would prevent the embryo from growing appropriately.
Okay, and so is it like considered an embryo when they place it back inside of you? It is.
Yes, it's a 5-day-old embryo.
Wow, that's so interesting to me. And so the first round did not take. And that, where did that leave you?
It was so heartbreaking. I had a lot of the same feelings that I had way back when we had done IUIs, feeling like I wasn't worthy to be a mother, or this was a big mistake. And obviously there's financial side of that too, feeling like, oh my gosh, we're spending this money again and there's no guarantee, and obviously it's not going to work because it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
So just a lot of pressure and a lot of pain that goes with it. And I went in and saw my doctor, and he said basically the same thing. Like, I can't prove why this would happen. And so there is one more test that has come out since we did your IUIs in the past, and I'd like you to consider it. And what that test does is you have to go in one day like the first day of your cycle, and then the third day of your cycle, I think, and they check the lining of your cervix, and that can tell you when your most optimal time to get pregnant is, because for like 99.9% of women, it's within this very tight, close window of time.
Because I don't think a lot of people know until they actually start trying to get pregnant, and then you're like, what? There's like this tiny little window. Like, it's amazing actually how it happens.
Yeah. And for some people, the window is shifted either just a little bit earlier or just a little bit later. And so with that test, we were able to determine that my window is about 12 hours earlier than almost everybody else on the planet.
Yeah.
And so using that information, we went back through the whole process of building up my lining, getting my body prepared, and then we went in and we did the transfer 12 hours earlier than we would have. And this time, because we felt like this was our very last opportunity of anything fertility related, we said, instead of transferring one embryo, we're going to max it out and transfer 2 embryos, because the chances of me getting pregnant at this point, I mean, we felt like it was like nothing.
Yeah. You're like, I'm going all in.
Yeah. And the percentages that our doctor had given us were IVF has a 60% success rate. And when you do 2 embryos, that bumps it up to an 80% success rate. But it also means that there's a much higher chance of twins.
Yeah.
And so we had always said, like, way back before all of this happened, that we wanted 2 or 3 kids. So we have Georgia. And if we get pregnant with twins, then that's the answer. We're having 3 kids.
Yeah.
So that day we went in, we transferred 2 embryos. I did things a little bit differently that round. I had an acupuncturist come, and she performed pre-transfer acupuncture and then post-transfer acupuncture as well. And I guess that's the only thing I did differently. But I was like, I'm pulling out all the stops. There's nothing that I won't do this time. I really, really want this.
Yeah, I want this so bad.
Yes. And then my doctor did do things a little bit differently as well. Instead of waiting for that 10-day mark to do the blood draw, he did them at day 3, day 5, day 7, and then the actual confirmation at day 10. because he wanted to see, even if I didn't get pregnant, how my hormones spiked during that period of time so that he could make decisions based off of that for the next round that we knew we weren't doing anyway.
Yeah.
And so 3 days after the transfer, I went in, I had my blood drawn. They said, your hormones are there, you're still pregnant. 5 days, same thing. 7 days, same thing. And then at the 10-day mark, when they would have done the initial blood draw, for most people, they said, you're still pregnant. So it's happening.
So exciting. Yay.
And then at that point, I had to wait a little bit. So yeah, at that point, you have to wait a couple of weeks. They won't do an ultrasound until you're at least 6 or 7 weeks. I can't remember. So I waited, and we had the ultrasound, and I still didn't feel like I was pregnant because I didn't believe it. Because after everything that
you were probably guarding at your feelings and everything. I can understand that.
Yeah. So we went back in, and this was my last appointment with our fertility doctor. Went in, had the ultrasound, and they were clearly able to see 2 little embryos in there, 2 little heartbeats, and so we confirmed that we were indeed pregnant with twins.
Did you think that you were going to be pregnant with twins, or did you just think that one took? Did that thought ever cross your mind?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly did. I still didn't feel like I was pregnant, so even getting the confirmation of pregnancy was just a shock on its own. But my husband said from like that first blood draw, he's like, it's going to be twins. I just know it. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah, so I would say even after that ultrasound, like having the picture felt more real, but it didn't feel real until I started having like pregnancy symptoms.
Yeah. And then you're like, okay, this is for real now.
Okay, I'm really pregnant.
Oh, we gotta love those. Oh.
Yeah.
And so tell me about your pregnancy with the twins. Was it everything you imagined? Was it, beautiful and glowing and all the fun stuff?
There's a lot of gross stuff, but also I felt really good in my body. It's something that I wanted for so long. And I felt beautiful. I felt a lot because I don't know what growing one baby feels like. I'm sure that there's a lot of taxing things that happen to your body. I know what growing twins feels like. And a lot of times I felt like I was a 90-year-old woman. So I had to do physical therapy for my hips and my back.
I feel like age plays a lot into that too. With my first child, I was 24, I think, and I turned 25 the month that she was born. And I felt like I did everything. I worked. I was, with an exception of like the terrible nausea that I kept like a majority of the whole entire pregnancy. I felt great. But then when I had my most recent baby, who is now a year, and so 34 was when I was pregnant with her, I like felt like you're saying you felt. I felt like a 90-year-old woman, and
it's so hard.
Everything hurt. I was so tired all the time. Like when she would move around, I would be like, oh my gosh, this is, when it first happens, it's beautiful. But then you're like, oh, I just wish that she would just be still. I just want to sleep. Like there's, it's beautiful, but it's definitely, like you said, taxing.
Yeah. And so for the most part through the pregnancy, I felt pretty good. And then towards the end, I started getting really swollen. I just had a lot of fluid retention. And I had kind of been afraid of having gestational diabetes during my pregnancy. I don't know why. It was just something that I was afraid of. And so when I was 34 weeks, I had swelled quite a bit over the weekend. I'd had an appointment on a Thursday and I had another one on a Monday. I'd swelled quite a bit over the weekend and I just didn't feel good anymore. So when I went in for my doctor's appointment, they always weigh you. And it's awful. I gained 6 pounds over the course of the weekend, all fluid. And my blood pressure was kind of elevated. And so when they did my urine collection, I asked them to process it while I was still in the office because I just felt like something wasn't right. And so they came back and they said, yeah, you have some protein in your urine. We'll do a 24-hour urine collection and then kind of see where we're at with everything. While I was checking out, they're like, you know what? Just go to the hospital, go to triage. They'll do a urine collection there, and then they can make the decision.
So what is protein in the urine? Like, what does that mean?
It's preeclampsia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the things that they check for regularly when you go. I don't even think I asked them what they were checking my urine for.
Yeah.
Okay. And
yeah, that's the main thing I think that they check with the urine.
Gotcha. And so they sent you to the hospital.
Yes. And we were unprepared for that because I was 34 weeks. I had a bag packed and I had a list of things, but I didn't really I had childcare arranged tentatively for like closer to my due date. We weren't really prepared for that early.
Yeah.
And so we went to the hospital and I was in triage and they're like, well, we'll keep you overnight. We'll do the 24-hour collection here. So Ron left and he went and got my things and got Georgia settled with some family. And we did the urine collection and they came back the next day and they're like, you know what? It's what it is. They're 34 weeks. They had already started me on steroids and antibiotics. And they're like, you're just going to get more sick from here. And we have to weigh the risk of your health and how early the babies are. And we think that that we should go ahead and have babies.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And so, you're having babies today.
Yes. Yeah. And so they started, I was very gung-ho about having natural birth. With twins, you can actually choose ahead of time.
I did not know that. I always felt like everyone that I know, not that I know that many people that have twins, you always hear about they're scheduling you for it. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, typically, if you go through your whole pregnancy, they won't allow twins to go past 38 weeks just because of how big they can get. Yeah. And because of the space in the uterus and the fluid.
I couldn't imagine. Oh my gosh.
And so that's why most people are scheduled. Because I was so much earlier, it was not even discussed yet. Like, I'm still weird. But I really wanted to experience natural birth. That's something that I had wanted. And not natural, like unmedicated, because I wanted to not feel it, but I also wanted to experience it.
I totally understand.
Yeah. So we started with some medications to kickstart labor and the balloon to kind of stretch out my cervix. And that went all day, all night, into the next day. Goodness. And they finally got me to about 4 centimeters. And at that point, they were like, okay, we can start Pitocin. And I was like, this is going to kill me.
Yeah.
So I decided, I had a consultation with my doctor, and she was like, this choice is still yours. We can start the Pitocin and continue with natural labor. Well,
right.
Natural
vaginal birth.
Yes. Or you can opt out and go the C-section route. I'm fine with either. You just let me know. And so I was like, I'm tired. I'm hungry. They hadn't let me eat for like over 24 hours because they were worried about me having to have surgery. Right. And I just wanted to be done.
I'm tired.
So so I opted for the C-section, and they prepped me for surgery, got me all ready, took me back to the OR. My husband got to be there with me, and They warned me. They said, your babies are early. We've started the steroids. They might not cry when they come out. There does not mean that there's anything wrong with them. You just have to be prepared that that might not happen. And so they pull my son out and they show him over the curtain, and he's just screaming. Aww. Beautiful baby boy. They set him to the side and they're like, and here's your baby girl. And same thing.
Aww.
She's screaming. And so my husband and I are both bawling.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Again, I'm getting the waterworks. Pregnancy stories just, I could listen to them all day long, and I'm going to cry too during every one of them.
Yeah. There's so much that goes into
so much strength.
Emotional, especially if you've experienced it. So the babies are doing fine. They're like trying to wrap up my surgery, and they ask, Ron, do you want to go with the babies to the nursery, or do you want to stay here with Sarah? And he's like, he asked me. And I was like, I'm fine. Go with them. Yeah. And so he leaves, and they're walking to the NICU. I'm in surgery. Something is not right. And I started to pass out on the table. I felt nauseous, cold, and I passed out. I came back to, and in this interim, they had called the NICU and told the nurse that they needed my husband to come back because something was not right. And for me, my doctor came up, she was right here in my face, and she's like, listen, I can't get your uterus to go back into your body. You are bleeding. We are transfusing blood. You need to give me permission to perform a hysterectomy, because if you don't, you're going to die. And so I said, okay. And she said, so I have your permission. I said, yes. And they knocked me out completely and finished the surgery. Meanwhile, my husband has come back and he's ready to run in. Mm-hmm. And the anesthesiologist met him at the door, and he was like, you've got a couple options. You can come in and see what's going on. I don't recommend it. I can stay here with you, or I can go back in and be with your wife, and you can stay right here. And so my husband was like, you go, I'll stay here. And so he was watching just like a chaos eruption in that room.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine what he was feeling.
Yeah. I'm actually really thankful that that it was happening to me, because I can't imagine seeing it either. And so they performed the surgery. He's able to come and see me. They took me to the ICU for the night. And because I was in the ICU, I wasn't able to see or hold the babies. So as soon as I was able to, I'm sure I drove the nurses insane in the ICU, because every single person that came in, they came in all the time because they were constantly monitoring me. I was like, when can I have something to drink? When can I eat? And when can I see my babies? Every single person, every single time. It didn't matter if you were here 4 minutes ago. I was going to ask the same questions. And so finally, about 26 hours after I gave birth, they were able to move me back to labor and delivery, and I got to see my babies for the first time.
Oh, gosh, I can't even imagine either being that long. Like when you deliver your children, you're like, I want to hold my babies, and the strength that it took to get through those hours is incredible.
Yeah.
And so that left you with unable to have children at this point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it saved your life. And so was this, which is huge. So like, thank goodness that you were able to make that decision, and the doctors worked that quickly so that you're here with us today, because that's an incredible story. Do you know if this is a common thing that happens?
I don't know if it's common. I have heard other stories about women experiencing something similar.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say it's common.
Was this a result of you said, I don't know if I'm saying this wrong, Preeclampsia?
The preeclampsia. It wasn't.
Wow.
They sent my uterus to a lab for, oh my gosh, I can't think of the word, testing.
Yeah.
After, and what they found was that one of the placentas from the babies had attached itself to the uterine lining.
Oh.
And so that was part of the problem.
Wow.
So if I had had natural birth, they would have likely ended up having to do surgery to remove that anyway.
Wow.
So either way, there's a pretty good chance that I would have ended up having to have a hysterectomy.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not saying that it wouldn't have been traumatic if you would have been able to vaginally deliver your children, but to me, it just seems like it's like the perfect scenario for you. The type of delivery that you gave, they were there, so they were able to go ahead and take care of that then. Like, maybe, you know, because you're talking about a split second, you know, seconds of just, in a few seconds, you had to make this decision to save your life on your own because your husband was with your children. And again, the strength, you know, I can't even imagine. Wow. That's an incredible story.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I do have a few questions that that came up during the interview that I wanted to ask. And so you mentioned that you guys got donor sperm. How does that process work? Is it like in the movies where you get to like pick out, I want this color hair, I want this IQ? Does it work that way?
It's very similar to that. There's a couple of sperm banks in the US and they have a database. So you go on and there's millions of people. So you can narrow it down by eye color, hair color, height, education, specific disease carrier, genes. There's so many.
That's incredible.
Different options.
It's like a Rolodex. You can just be like, okay. Wow. And so when you guys were making those decisions, were there any major factors that played into the role of choosing?
Yeah. My husband did not make the decision because he felt like that was very weird.
Yeah.
And so the biggest thing is we both have blue eyes. So if we did have a natural child, the chances of us having a blue-eyed baby are so high. That was the main thing that we looked for. And so he asked me just to use whatever criteria I wanted and narrow it down to a top 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And then he made the final decision based on that.
Aww.
And so you can see baby pictures of the donors.
Really? Wow, that is so fascinating.
Yeah.
Aww.
So we narrowed it down by eye color, and then there's a couple of genes that I carry that don't affect me, but if the biological father also carried that, then there's a higher risk of the child having that disease. And so we narrowed it down by that.
Wow.
And then he picked the one that he felt like looked most like his baby picture.
That's what I was going to ask too. So like essentially, I mean, that's how I would approach it if it was me, was trying to find features that would help, you know, identify as being your child. You know, hair color, eye color, skin color.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating. I really didn't think that it was like that, but that's cool. So I would assume that the same would go for egg donor. It would be probably a very similar situation where
I would assume that too.
Yeah. That's so cool. And so you used donor for the IUI, and then you also used a donor for the IVF. Yes. Very interesting. That's so cool. Science is amazing. It's so amazing. And so I don't know a lot about fertility treatment. When I think of, I don't know, for some reason, IVF always seems like an unrealistic thing for middle class people, and especially those that lower class, I guess, would be I'm not sure what the proper term is for that. I hate to class people, but, just financially, I think of tens of thousands of dollars for these things. Is that what you're looking at when you're talking about that?
Yeah, that's pretty typical. I think a traditional IVF, a round of IVF would be about $30,000.
Yeah, that's the number that comes. 30 was the number literally in my head that came to mind. And that is not paid by most insurances, right?
Correct. Yeah. But for us, with the reduced cost IVF that our doctor offered and the insurance coverage that my husband's company offered, it was far, far less than that. Like less than a quarter.
A manageable number. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. That's awesome, because I know that I listened to a podcast before our interview, and it was Canadian based, and they were interviewing a lady that a couple that was having fertility treatments, and I think they may have tried, the IVF, and it wouldn't take, and then so they went down the road of surrogacy, and they were just talking about like the price. They were from, I can't remember what country. I should have wrote it down. But again, the podcast is Canadian based, but they came to Canada for their surrogacy program because it was financially, a lot of people seek these medical treatments and, these different things in other countries because it's just so expensive.
Yeah.
So did you guys ever consider doing surrogacy?
It's something that crossed my mind for a while after the twins were very, very easy babies. They are not, they're 2 now, and they're nightmares.
Yeah.
Because they're 2.
Yeah.
So I'm far past that mentality.
Yeah, the baby fever is kind of gone now, right?
It's gone. But for a while I was like, man, we could just throw one more in this mix and it would be great. And so surrogacy did cross my mind for a while, and I had a couple friends that I was like, oh, maybe they might do that for me. But that is gone. We are a family of 5. We will remain a family of 5.
Yeah.
Unless God has some grand plan that I am unaware of that may happen someday.
Yeah. Well, I think it's incredible. And I just think that you highlighting the beauty behind unconventional families, because, and the science that is out there for us now to help us achieve the things that we really want. So it's such an incredible story. Back onto the IVF. So just because I want to touch on that again, I know that there's probably a lot of people that will hear this and just, I know when I briefly, and when I say briefly, it was a brief struggle with infertility. We had got pregnant, I miscarried, and then my doctors had told me that, you could pretty much start, because of where we were in the pregnancy and when the miscarriage happened, that pretty much next cycle you could start trying again, which also leads me to another question. I'm going to jump back on that too here in a second, but I want to finish this one up. But, when you start thinking about, okay, well, what happens if I keep miscarrying, or, we have to, or I can't get pregnant afterwards? And it took probably about, I want to say 6 or 7 months after, trying again after the miscarriage. And you get to a point where you're just like where you guys were, where I was just like, you know what, like, let's just focus on our careers. Let's travel. Like, it's not meant to happen right now. And then sure enough, it wasn't 2 months later when we had made that talk and we got pregnant. And so where I'm getting with this is when I started thinking about the possibility, because you have to, and I'm not sure if it's the same across the board, but you have to wait a year before you can actually start seeking fertility treatment. Where we are, was that it for you? You have to wait a year of not getting pregnant? Yeah,
I feel like I had reached out to my OB prior to that year, and they're like, it's fine, just wait a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably true.
Yeah. they told me, you know, a year of trying. If you don't get pregnant within a year, then you can come back and we can start doing tests and evaluating. So like in my brain, I'm like, oh my gosh, like what if we have to get fertility treatments? Like what does that look like? And you mentioned doing, you know, the injections, and I'm sure it's a whole body, like your whole routine is just completely, you know, all about that treatment. And then financially, because there are a lot of insurances that don't cover that. And then you start thinking, you know, is this something that we can afford to even try? And you're not guaranteed. So do you think that fertility treatment, you know, insurances usually pay for birth control. Do you think it's an important thing that insurances cover this for people?
Yeah, I do. I think that it's being covered more and more now. A lot of bigger tech companies have fertility and adoption assistance. And I think it's just, I mean, for people that want to have a family, they should have that ability.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it should be covered.
Yeah. I think that it's just insane, the price in general, to have these procedures done, which you know firsthand because you know how, it's not an invasive procedure, right? It's a fairly simple procedure, but you know all of the stuff that goes behind it, and it seems like a lot. So I guess that's where a lot of the cost comes to play, is that covers. So yeah, it's like a blanket coverage.
Yeah, and the doctor that we saw, he's able to do a lower cost IVF just by volume alone because he has so many patients that he can offer these services at a lower price.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
If he could do it, I think most doctors could.
Yeah, definitely. Or at least maybe do some kind of, I don't know, like pro bono work, you know, case by case type situation.
Or
just because I couldn't.
Yeah. Offering some sort of a payment plan or assistance.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, such an incredible story. Oh my gosh. I had a question and then I should have wrote it down, but that's how my brain works sometimes. It's like ding, 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 and then it goes away. But I do want to ask you, would you have any advice for anyone that may find themselves in a similar situation, you know, struggling to get pregnant? Would you have any advice for them?
It's hard because I would want to say just be patient.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen for everyone. So it's not like my story is I was patient and it happened.
Right.
I was patient and I got lucky, or it was just my story.
Yeah.
I was just on a different timeline than my brain was. So I don't want to say that and feel misleading that just patience leads to what you want. I would say find other people that are experiencing what you're experiencing, because the people in your life that love you but haven't experienced it won't be helpful.
Right. Yeah. So I'm sure there are tons of communities online. The internet is an amazing place too for connecting and finding that support. And so I can understand exactly what you're saying, because like you said, it doesn't necessarily happen for everyone. If you're able to give it a try, but definitely finding that support system to help you through, because again, my situation with having trouble getting pregnant, not as fast as I thought that I should have, was difficult. You know, each month your menstrual comes around and you're not pregnant, and it's crushing, because we feel like as women, and that's how I felt, and that's what I told my husband, that I'm the woman, I'm supposed to be able to give you children. Like,
it feels broken.
Yeah. And so I struggled a lot with it, you know, even though it was a short amount of time, the struggle was definitely there. The mental, you know, I think of myself back. I had to write it down. I had to write a blog because I didn't feel good until after I just got out, like how I felt. And so finding a community, finding those supportive people around you that have been through similar situations or or even just educated in that field and can be that support that you need. I think that's great advice. I think that's beautiful advice, Sarah. Thank you so much for saying that. I do have one more question that I like to ask all of my guests. So if you don't mind, we're going to jump right into that one. We like to think of stepping into our own power, or we like to talk about stepping into our own power here on the show and not thinking of that as a bad thing. How do you think of, or how would you try to describe this type of power that you have to step into every day?
I think I can answer that two ways. One would be just allowing myself to be comfortable with how things happened. And so feeling like in the past, feeling like I wasn't meant to be a mom or I wouldn't be a good mom. And that's why those things didn't happen for me. That's a big one. Just feeling like this is who I am and this is my destiny. And I'm okay with feeling that now.
Yeah.
And then feeling proud of our story. So being an adoptive mom, being the mom of IVF babies.
Yeah.
It's just not traditional. And so I think there can be some shame or discomfort with talking about those things, but I'm not uncomfortable with it. I think it's really important to get out there.
Most definitely. Like, let's just do away with this whole, like, you know, label thing that we all sometimes try to find ourselves doing. Like, what's the proper family, you know, build? What builds a proper family? What is a family? And I think that you are a amazing example of, like, family is however you create it. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And all you need is each other and love and, like, it's amazing.
Yeah, and seeing my husband step into that role. I mean, not one of our children is biologically related to him. He's their dad.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Highlight that. That's incredible.
Yeah.
You know.
And he feels that. He's felt that since the day he held Georgia for the first time.
I love that.
He's their dad.
Yeah. And I'm sure he is an incredible one at that.
He is.
Thank you, Sarah, so much for being on the show today and sharing your amazing story. Like, it really is from beginning, and it's not at the end, but just, it's amazing. And I can't thank you enough for sharing that with us. And I think that it's going to be very educational and very hopeful for those out there who may be able to connect with the story. But yeah, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yes. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I want to thank my guests again for sharing their incredible story of transformation with us. I'm going to link their social medias below so that you can give them a follow. And of course, if you guys felt personally connected to the story and you would like to support the podcast by purchasing one of the limited edition prints that goes along with it, you can do so at my new website. It is iampower.club. And of course, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at iampowerclub. And lastly, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss next week's episode of I Am Power. We will see you then.